Nobody expected that a crumbling kitchen wall in a Brooklyn apartment would destroy a marriage, reveal a 20-year-old secret, and somehow save an entire family. My name is Daniel Whitmore, and what I'm about to tell you is something I've never told anyone outside my family. But I think you need to hear it.
Because maybe, just maybe, you're standing exactly where I stood 3 years ago, ready to give up on everything.
It was February 2021. New York City was still shivering under the weight of a pandemic that had already taken too much from too many. I was 44 years old, living in a rent-stabilized two-bedroom apartment in Bay Ridge, Brooklyn, with my wife Karen and our two kids, Sophie, who was 15, and Marcus, who had just turned 12. From the outside, we looked like a family that had it together. Karen worked as a billing coordinator at a dental office in Manhattan. I drove for a delivery company, the kind of job where your back aches before your shift even starts. We weren't rich. We weren't poor. We were that invisible middle, the people New York City runs on but never sees. But inside that apartment, behind the closed door with the 3 locks, things were falling apart. Karen and I had stopped talking. Not the way couples stop talking in movies, with dramatic fights and thrown plates. No, we stopped talking the quiet way, the dangerous way. She'd come home. I'd come home. We'd move around each other like two strangers in a subway car. Careful not to touch. Careful not to make eye contact. Careful not to exist too loudly in each other's space. I don't even remember when it started. That's the terrifying part. One day you're laughing together over cheap Chinese takeout, and then years pass, and you realize the last time you laughed together, your daughter was in elementary school. Sophie had noticed. Kids always notice. She'd started spending all her time in her room, headphones on, door shut. She was failing 2 classes. Her school counselor had called 3 times. I kept meaning to call back. I kept not calling back. Marcus was different. Marcus was the kind of kid who tried to fix everything. He'd crack jokes at dinner that nobody laughed at. He'd suggest family movie nights that nobody showed up for. Eventually, even Marcus stopped trying. And the night I saw that boy sitting alone on the fire escape, staring at the Brooklyn sky with absolutely nothing in his eyes, that was the night I knew we were in serious trouble. But I didn't do anything, because I was drowning in my own silence. The kitchen wall had been a problem for months. There was a crack running from the ceiling to just behind the refrigerator, probably from the old building settling, probably from decades of New York City plumbing doing whatever it wants. Our landlord, Mr. Kowalski, was 81 years old and lived in New Jersey and answered maintenance requests the way most people answer spam calls. One Saturday morning in late February, I decided to fix it myself. Not because I'm handy. I'm not. But because I needed something to do with my hands that wasn't pouring another drink or scrolling through my phone pretending the world wasn't collapsing. I pulled the refrigerator out from the wall. The crack was worse than I thought. A long, jagged split in the old plaster, wide enough to fit my fingers into. I started pulling away the loose chunks, figuring I'd patch it with some joint compound from the hardware store. That's when I found it. Behind the plaster, tucked into a gap between the wall studs, there was a small metal box. It was the kind of tin that used to hold butter cookies, the Danish ones with the blue lid. It was rusted at the edges, and when I shook it, something shifted inside. I opened it. Inside, there were 3 things: a faded photograph of a woman and a young girl, a dried flower that crumbled the moment air touched it, and a letter. The letter was written on lined paper, the kind torn from a composition notebook, and the handwriting was shaky but deliberate. Someone had taken great care with every word. The letter was dated November 15th, 2003. To whoever finds this, my name is Grace Delgado. I have lived in this apartment for 11 years. I am writing this letter because tomorrow I am leaving, and I don't think I will ever come back. The girl in the photograph is my daughter, Lily. She is 9 years old in that picture. She was the most beautiful thing I ever made. She had her father's eyes and my stubbornness, and when she laughed, I swear the whole building laughed with her. Lily died on March 3rd, 2001. Leukemia. She was 14. After Lily died, my husband Roberto left. Not right away. He stayed for 7 months, but he was already gone. I could see it. Every time he looked at me, he saw her. And the pain of seeing her in my face was worse for him than the pain of leaving. So he left. I don't blame him. I want to. God, I want to. But I don't. After Roberto left, I stayed in this apartment alone. I kept Lily's room exactly the way she left it. Her posters, her books, that stupid purple lamp she begged me to buy from a street vendor on Fifth Avenue. I kept it all because I thought if I kept her things alive, some part of her would stay. But things are not people. And keeping a room frozen in time does not stop time from moving. I am writing this letter because I want someone to know that a family lived here, that we laughed here, that on Saturday mornings, Roberto would make pancakes shaped like animals, and Lily would name every single one before she ate it, that we watched the fireworks from the fire escape every 4th of July, and Lily always covered her ears but refused to go inside because she said the colors were worth the noise. I want someone to know that this apartment, these walls, they held love once. Real, messy, imperfect, beautiful love. I am leaving tomorrow because I finally understand something it took me 2 years to learn. You cannot live inside your grief forever. At some point, you have to step outside of it. Not because the grief goes away. It never goes away. But because the people who are still alive, they need you present. They need you here. My sister in Queens has been calling me every day for 2 years. Every single day. And every day, I let it go to voicemail. Yesterday, I finally picked up. She was crying before I even said hello. She said, "Grace, I lost Lily too. But I can't lose you." And I realized. I had been so focused on the person I lost that I forgot about the people who were still reaching for me. So tomorrow, I'm leaving. I'm going to my sister's house. I'm going to sit at her kitchen table and drink her terrible coffee and let her hold my hand, and I'm going to try, really try, to come back to life. If you're reading this, I don't know who you are, but I want you to know something. Whatever you're going through in this apartment, between these walls, it is not the end of your story. These walls have held grief before. They've held silence and loneliness and the kind of pain that makes you forget how to breathe. But they've also held love. They've held pancake mornings and firework nights, and a little girl who named her food. Don't wait as long as I did. Don't let the silence win. With hope I'm not sure I've earned. Grace Delgado. I sat on the kitchen floor for a long time after I read that letter. The plaster dust was on my jeans, the tin box in my lap, and my hands were shaking in a way they hadn't shaken since my father's funeral. I read it again, and then again. Don't let the silence win. I looked around my kitchen. The dishes in the sink that nobody claimed. The expired coupons on the refrigerator held up by magnets from places we'd never visit. The calendar on the wall still turned to January, because nobody cared enough to flip it. And I thought about Marcus on the fire escape, and Sophie behind her locked door, and Karen sleeping on the far edge of the bed like she was trying to fall off the earth. I thought about Roberto leaving because looking at Grace hurt too much. And I thought about how Karen couldn't look at me anymore, not because of grief, but because of something worse. Indifference. The kind of indifference that settles over a marriage like dust over furniture in a room nobody enters. I stood up. I walked to the bedroom. Karen was sitting on the bed, folding laundry, her face blank the way it always was now. Not angry, not sad, just gone. I held out the letter. "Read this," I said. She looked at me. For a second, I saw something flash across her face, suspicion, maybe, or exhaustion. The look of a woman who had stopped expecting anything meaningful from the man she married. But she took the letter. I watched her read it. I watched her face change, slowly at first, like sunrise through a dirty window, and then all at once. Her eyes filled. Her hand came up to her mouth. She got to the part about the sister calling every day, and a sound came out of her that I hadn't heard in years, a real, human, broken sound. She looked up at me, and for the first time in longer than I could remember, she actually saw me. "Danny," she whispered. And that was all she said. Just my name. But the way she said it, it sounded like a door opening. We sat on the bed and talked for 4 hours. For hours. We hadn't talked for 4 hours total in the last year. And now it all came pouring out. Every resentment, every loneliness, every night one of us lay awake wanting to reach across the bed, but not knowing how. Karen told me she had been thinking about leaving. She'd looked up apartments in the Bronx near her mother's place. She'd even driven up there one afternoon after work, sat in the car outside a building on Grand Concourse, and tried to picture a life without me. "I couldn't see it," she said. "But I couldn't see a life with you either. I couldn't see anything." I told her about the drinking. Not a lot. I wasn't stumbling home or missing work, but enough. A few beers on the route. A flask in the glove compartment. The kind of drinking that nobody notices until the day everyone notices. She cried when I told her that. Not because she was angry, but because she'd known. She'd smelled it. She'd seen the bottles in the recycling. And she hadn't said anything because she'd been afraid that if she started a conversation, it would be the last conversation. We called Sophie out of her room. She came to the doorway with her headphones around her neck, looking at us like we were strangers who'd broken into her house. "We need to talk to you," Karen said. "About what?" Sophie's voice was flat, guarded. 15 years old and already fluent in the language of self-protection. "About us," I said. "About this family." Sophie stood in that doorway for a long moment. Then, quietly, carefully, she came and sat on the edge of the bed. Marcus appeared behind her, because Marcus always appeared. He was always listening, always hoping, always waiting for someone to invite him back in. I read the letter out loud. All of it. My voice cracked twice, and I didn't try to hide it. When I finished, the room was so quiet I could hear the radiator clicking. Marcus spoke first. "Of course he did." "Did she make it?" he asked. "Grace, did she make it to her sister's house?" I looked at my son. My beautiful, hopeful, 12-year-old son who still believed that stories had good endings. "I don't know," I said. "But she tried. She decided to try." Sophie was crying. She was trying not to. Her jaw was tight. Her fists were clenched. But the tears came anyway. Karen reached for her, and Sophie flinched. And then she didn't flinch. And then she was in her mother's arms, sobbing the way only a teenager can sob, with her whole body, like the grief had been stored in her bones. Marcus climbed onto the bed and leaned into me, and I put my arm around him. And for the first time in what felt like years, the four of us were in the same room, at the same time, feeling the same thing. I wish I could tell you that everything changed overnight. It didn't. That's not how real life works, and I promised you a real story. The next few months were hard. Karen and I started couples counseling at a clinic on 4th Avenue that charged on a sliding scale. Our therapist was a woman named Dr. Reeves who had a way of asking questions that made you feel like she already knew the answer but needed you to say it out loud. I stopped drinking. Not dramatically, not with a big declaration. I just stopped. I poured the flask out in the kitchen sink while Karen watched, and she didn't say anything, and I didn't say anything, and that silence, for once, felt like the right kind. Sophie started seeing the school counselor voluntarily. Her grades came up. Not all the way. She never did pass chemistry that year, but enough. She started eating dinner with us again. She even laughed at one of Marcus's terrible jokes once, and Marcus looked so shocked and happy that I had to leave the room so nobody would see my face. We never found Grace Delgado. I tried. I searched online, checked social media, even asked Mr. Kowalski if he remembered the previous tenants. He didn't. The trail was cold, 20 years cold, and some stories don't give you the ending you want. But here's what I believe. I believe Grace made it to her sister's kitchen table. I believe she drank that terrible coffee. I believe she came back to life. Not all the way, not perfectly, but enough. I believe it because she left that letter in the wall. She left it on purpose. A woman who had given up completely wouldn't do that. Only someone who still had hope, fragile, bruised, barely breathing hope, would hide a message in a wall for a stranger to find. She wrote it for whoever came next. She wrote it for us. It's been 3 years now. Karen and I aren't perfect. We still argue about money, about the kids, about whose turn it is to deal with Mr. Kowalski about the bathroom faucet that's been dripping since September. But we argue out loud. We argue in the open, where arguments belong, instead of letting them rot in the silence between us. Sophie is 18 now. She's starting community college in the fall. She wants to be a social worker. She says she wants to help families who are stuck. I know where she learned that word. Marcus is 15, and he still tries to fix everything. But now he does it with more wisdom and less desperation. Last week, he made pancakes on Saturday morning. He shaped one like a dog and held it up and said, "His name is Gerald, and he's about to be delicious." Karen looked at me across the kitchen. I looked at her, and we laughed. A real laugh. The kind that starts in your chest and fills the room and makes the walls remember what they're for. The letter is framed now. It hangs in our hallway, right between Sophie's school photo and a picture Marcus drew of our family when he was 8. 4 stick figures holding hands under a yellow sun. Every now and then, a visitor notices it and asks about it, and I tell them the story. And every single time, without fail, someone's eyes fill with tears. Not because it's sad, though it is, but because they recognize it. They recognize the silence. They recognize the distance. They recognize the moment when you realize that the people you love are still right there, still reaching for you. And all you have to do, the only thing you have to do, is reach back.